This episode of the podcast is brought to you by LeafWell.
Hello, Cannabinoid Connect listeners. Have you ever thought about getting a medical card? The process can be intimidating and hard to navigate. That's why I've partnered with LeafWell, the easiest and most affordable way to get a medical card in Texas and 32 other states in the U.S. LeafWell seamlessly connects you to a network of doctors that will help you get certified online in minutes. LeafWell is run by data scientists, cannabis specialists, and patient advocates that are passionate about increasing access and education around medical cannabis. LeafWell's patient support team is also there to support you throughout your entire journey using medical cannabis. As I've mentioned, I've partnered with LeafWell to provide all my listeners with a discount to become certified for medical cannabis. Simply go to their website at leafwell.com and use the promo code CCTX to receive $15 off the price of getting a medical card. LeafWell only charges you if you get approved, so what do you have to lose? Visit their website at leafwell.com today and use the promo code CCTX to get certified for medical cannabis. Risk-free. Willy Christie, what's going on, man?
Hey, not too much. Just enjoying a break from the rain out here.
Oh yeah, you're in is it California?
Yeah, I'm in LA right now.
Man, yeah, there's been a lot of flooding and rain. Has the rain not stopped? I mean, how long has that been going on?
It's been a couple days straight. There was like a break a couple days ago, and then the last couple days have just been even more intense, I feel like. So,
Jeez,
but
man.
it's not raining today, but it's definitely gloomy.
Well, hopefully the sun will pop out soon and we'll get back to sunny California weather. I know that
I
that's
know.
being desperately missed right now. Well, Willie, I mean, before we started recording, man, I had to give you props. I really enjoyed listening to your music, Kukuni, and as I mentioned, I got a lot of Radiohead vibes from it, some Tom York stylistic, I don't know, just the whole kind of vibe just gave me that. So I can't wait to dive into it more and talk about, what Kukuni's music represents and, how you go about the songwriting process. But before we do that, I also understand that you're a grower and a breeder of cannabis genetics. So
hmm
just give me a sense of your background, man. I mean, you grow, you produce music. So tell us a little bit about Willie.
Well, I started out in Kansas. My, I mean, weed is still illegal there, but I started out, I just went, my mom was a music teacher growing up, so she was always encouraging me to like pick out, listen to songs and be like, what instrument is that? And, just kind of making me actively listen to music from a young age. And then on top of that, she was also deaf, or she is deaf. And so she like partially deaf legally. She's like 60% in one ear, 40% in the other, something like that. And
Mhm.
probably worse now, she's getting old.
With old age, yeah,
Sorry,
that's just
mom.
naturally happen.
uh, but so she would also always just be like, what did they say? Like we'd have to, me and my brother would have to like listen to a song just to tell her what the lyrics were saying, which I'm sure, as listening to music, and especially, to bring it back to Tom York, like you can't tell half the time, the best thing
Right,
you can do is just guess. And so
right.
it's like, I don't think you're that deaf, like this, I have no idea what they're saying in this one, mom, or. So
Yeah.
I always grew up paying attention to music. Um, and the weed thing sort of just happened as it happens. You try it in high school and you either like it or you don't. And I really liked it. But I got caught and quit for a couple years. And then when I started up again, it was just like, there's no reason not to smoke weed other than, risking your life in jail. Other than that, for me, it was just like, I already loved music. So when I smoked weed for the first time, it was just like, oh my gosh, like this is a whole nother, you know, world in music, or another like way to appreciate music. It just kind of it expands your mind and kind of opens your ears to things you've never heard before. And I think the two of them combined really is what kind of led me to where I'm at today.
Yeah. I mean, well, I want to ask you, so with your mom and you would, when she'd ask like the lyrics and you'd listen to that particular style of music, let's take again, Radiohead, for example. Would she be surprised the fact that you guys both would be like, I don't know, mom, like it's so complex and deep. I mean, how did she receive that?
Yeah, well, for the record, she was definitely not cool enough to listen to Radiohead when I was growing up. I have a lot of friends that they're like, yeah, my parents listened to blah blah, Funkadelic or the Ramones. Like my mom listened to Reba McEntire, Shania Twain. It was all very like female-led country.
Sure.
So like when we couldn't, it would just be like, we don't know, I don't know, mom. Like, and this was before the internet too, before you could just look it up. And I mean, the internet was around, but it was not where it is today. The best chance you had was you bought the album and then you'd have
Right.
to you read the lyrics in the liner notes.
I got you. Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. And it also makes sense when you talk about like that marriage between cannabis and music and how like it opens up that consciousness, right? And it really expands creativity and it's a whole different experience, like you said, listening and enjoying music than you would without consuming. And so I'm curious because there's also this psychedelic aspect to it, right? So where does that converge and come into play?
That came from the next logical progression. Once you're smoking weed, um and I took mushrooms for the first time after college. So I was like 19 or something like that. And that's just, marijuana or cannabis is like a mild psychedelic, and mushrooms are just a fully blown psychedelic. So it was sort of like, one led to the other without necessarily saying it was a gateway drug thing. I just knew that, um I just seen the movies. It just came from like pop culture and the movies, like, oh, like the same people that smoke weed also do mushrooms, and you like see cool colors, and you reach new understandings of music or whatever. And um so I just had this idea of what mushrooms was, and I knew that it was like relatively safe and had a lot of like cultural significance to plenty of different civilizations besides ours. So I knew that I was in like good company.
Right.
And yeah, and anybody that's done mushrooms knows like how much, just listening. I used to listen to Spangle. I would specifically start searching out psychedelic music at that point in my life. I was like, what is the best music to listen to, while tripping? That was sort of a fun couple years for me too.
Yeah. It's so funny you talk about that because I've also had periods where if I'm taking psychedelics, like I haven't gone the music route, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on like top artists that you'd recommend listening to while tripping. But I've done that on the video side. So like I've gone on YouTube and watched like psychedelic videos that are produced for you being on a trip, right? And it's some wild stuff, man. Like there's a whole community. And of course there is, right? But I mean, like when you first kind of see it, you're blown away with like, oh, this is a thing. Like people actually do this, and it's mind-boggling, man. Like I saw one video, I'll never forget this. It was like 10 minutes long. And you know how a video can be in frames, so like it's a photograph but it's one photograph then another, so it's like stitched together so it moves like a video but it's just really frame by frame by frame. Well,
Hmm.
that's what this was, but it was paintings on like like on the street, or like, so it was like a mural on a wall that showed like a shark swimming, and then that shark like then moved to the street. And so like, and this guy, just this artist or this girl, whoever it was, continued to just draw and create this story out of all these frames of just this new development of the mural art, wherever the hell it's going, whether it be on the wall, inside, and the pipes, in the trash can, comes out of the trash can, and there's all this noise that's combined with it, the clinks and the clanks and the man, it was some wild shit, and I really enjoyed that. So I would imagine, yeah, like in your experience with music, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's even like a lot of like Adult Swim, I forget what they call it, um like late night Adult Swim compilations where it's like it is the combination of like really crazy trippy music with visuals, and it's usually like shorts from different artists that they sort of like put next to each other, so like already trippy music videos and then with a song playing. There was one song that I saw recently. It's a band called Weaval. I don't even know if that's how it's pronounced, but Weval. Very Radiohead, Tame Impala inspired music as well. And they have one of the most insane videos I've probably ever seen in my life. And it's like it had to have been done by an algorithm, because the amount of time it would have taken a human to do this is like stunning. But it's just like all these like it's like streets, but it's like 1,000 different types of streets all laid on, like all clicking
Like
back and forth.
layered.
Yeah, but it's not layered. It's like it's just like one picture after another, and it creates this movement, but it's like a picture of a street, and then it switches to like the top of a cathedral, and it's like the top of like 1,000 cathedrals, but the algorithm like keeps it in the same like spot, where it just looks like it's just constantly cycling and moving around. But it's, you're looking at like a dome from the floor up, but it's like 1,000 different domes, all just sort of super and like, but it's
Wow.
the same. I can't even describe it. But yeah, I would say check out the Someday. It's Someday by Weval. That video
Someday.
and the song is incredible too.
So yeah, I mean, I wish, like, because I'm not set up right now to share that kind of video, because I would, if you could like hear the audio, I'd love to do that, but I don't want to like risk it and fuck it up. So sorry everyone listening or watching, but you heard it from Willy firsthand. Say it again. We've all
The song is called Someday.
someday. Perfect. Yeah, yeah. So Willy, tell me, like, there's obviously, like we said, a community, and there's content creators for this type of content, this niche content, right? And there's people that are consuming it. Like, so what does the process look like? Like, what is the anatomy of making a psychedelic record or producing a psychedelic video? I mean, I would imagine there's some type of microdosing or even full blown psychedelic experience, but maybe not all the time. I mean, what is it? What does it look like for you?
For me, like I feel like I don't even do psychedelics anymore. That like I've done, other than weed, I don't even do psychedelics anymore. But I feel like just knowing what that experience is like, and um, I just feel that in order to like make psychedelic music, it helps to have, to have been experienced, as Jimi Hendrix says. But I don't even know. I feel like there's a lot of artists out there that are making just like sonically engaging music where it's still like debatable. It's like I don't know, like it sounds like they've done acid before, but like there is I think there's just something to be said for like just art. The beauty of art and truth just resonates. And when you're in a psychedelic state, you're just so much more sensitive to every little nuanced detail that's in there. So I feel like most of, at least like the overtly psychedelic stuff, just comes down into like the fine details, like the reverb you choose or the delay that's happening in the background. Like it's the subtle stuff that really pops out when you're, when you're under the influence listening to like a psychedelic or something that could be considered psychedelic. It's usually like the details for me, like the because when you're on mushrooms, you sort of start to have this natural delay happening, which that's when you're feeling it, is when the normal sounds, the door creaking turns into like a, like kind of trails off, and you're just like, okay, definitely feeling it right now.
Right.
And so I don't want to give all of the credit to psychedelics. I feel like just human creativity is so limitless that like you could do this completely sober, but then appreciate it on a fully engaged level while you're on psychedelics. So one doesn't have to lend to the other, but it definitely, I feel like psychedelics just sort of, like you said, it expands your perception and sort of like really takes you into the moment to fully appreciate every little detail of what's in front of you.
Yeah, it's beautifully put, Willie. I mean, I get exactly what you're saying. Like having the experience of going through a psychedelic trip helps, right? Because you've kind of been elevated in that kind of conscious or that type of experience where you hear those nuances and you kind of you feel that kind of stuff, but you can then translate that as an artist, right? And leverage the infinite possibilities of the creative human mind, right? By kind of marrying the two, not marrying the two in the sense that you're doing it in real time all the time, but you're taking that experience and you're building upon it because you're aware of it, you're conscious that it exists. And those that are maybe experiencing psychedelics, they're enjoying it, right? Because you've kind of accounted for that. You've anticipated that type of experience. It's amazing to, and you know who also has kind of echoed what you're saying is Andy Astra. She's the founder and creative director of Spooky Girl, and her art is very psychedelic inspired. She's been on the podcast previously, and she mentioned the same thing. She's like, I don't really do psychedelics anymore. I used to. It's not like a huge part of my life, but um it's kind of inspired by some of the experiences that have informed where I'm at today. So tell me a little bit about your songwriting process. So outside of like, we talked about the anatomy of your going about how you produce psychedelic records and music, but how do you go about the songwriting process?
Anymore, it's just a matter of sitting down and doing it. Like I'm most comfortable with the guitar, which is good and bad. Sometimes I can sit down with the guitar and feel good about what I'm putting down and just write a whole song all the way through. Sometimes I feel like I'm falling back into, old habits or, just like shapes and chord progressions that I am just comfortable playing on the guitar. And so sometimes I have to push myself, or sometimes I just get inspired by a sample or a drum machine loop, or most of the time it's synthesizers anymore. There's so much. My old producer Tony Buchan, who was the producer on the album, he would just like show me a new toy that he got, show me some new synthesizer, and he's just like, it's free content, man. You could write a whole album off of some of this stuff, like just a new synth and just pushing some buttons, lock it in, and then you can just start writing from there. Like I feel like once you start writing songs, there's no like formula. I think Paul McCartney even said 4 or 5 years ago, he's like, you never figure it out. There's nothing to figure out. And I think as soon as you think you've figured it out, you start writing like the worst music of your life. It's a
What
constant journey.
what else is like that? That's so interesting. Like what else in life is like that?
I know. I mean, for me,
Because like
growing weed is pretty similar.
I
I'm
get,
all
yeah. Go ahead.
as soon as I think I have it figured out, some new bug comes along, or some nutrient deficiency comes along, or just variables are just constantly thrown in, and so it's like you have to just roll with the punches. So it's like life, it's a metaphor for life. You'll never figure it out. You just have to stay
Right.
open to what's in front of you.
Right. I asked that question really like seriously, but I'm as you were talking, I'm thinking like I don't think that there is anything where you like because industries, businesses are evolving, right? And they're innovating. They're constantly innovating. Tech's innovating. Cannabis is innovating. Music innovates and changes and grows. And So I'm thinking, like, is there one profession or one type of trade? Probably not. Like, because there's always out there that's someone that's gonna do it differently or do it in a way that no one's thought of yet, right? Like that's what
Mhm.
humans do.
I mean, maybe in terms of like thinking they've got it figured out and staying the same forever.
Yeah, that's
Um,
not sustainable.
yeah, I would say institutionalized religion. That's one of the very few things, you know, they're like,
Well,
okay, one guy said it 3,000 years ago, don't change.
so there's truth to that, but like you see like the church be more accepting of like homosexuals, right? Like so there's aspects of religion that have to adapt because there's that fear of being irrelevant, right? If you're not progressing and moving. So I see your point though. Like the ideology itself has remained the same for quite some time. Yeah, that's true.
There's a really there's a book called The Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Um, and the author, he wrote a sequel called Lila that he sort of, I think it's Lila. Yeah, Lila, and he sort of expanded on his initial. It was like a thought thing. It was modern day philosophy that was so radical that he had to put it in a nonfiction book. But
Wow.
he sort of described this. He's trying to describe what quality is, you know, like what makes something objectively good. Why is the Mona Lisa regarded universally as a masterpiece? You know, like what is it that makes this quality? And so the first book, Zen and the Art of the Motorcycle Maintenance, he sort of just defines quality as like the moment where the, and I'm like really butchering this, where like the artist's intention resonates with the audience, and like quality is that connection in between the two, so it's not like the artist is saying it's quality. it I don't know.
They're
And
meeting
so
in the middle, kind of like because it's inferred by the consumer is this saying, hey, there is quality here, and that was the intention of the artist, right? So
Mhm,
they,
mhm.
yeah.
And so he goes on to differentiate in the sequel static quality and dynamic quality, and how static quality, for example, like a religious ideology, something that really is radical for its time, you know, just it comes out and disrupts everything and becomes static. But initially it's dynamic, you know, it's like very free flowing and sort of like representative of the time, and it sort of breaks the norm, it breaks that status quo, but then inevitably becomes the status quo. You know, like I was raised Catholic, so I can use Jesus as an example. He came out against the whole institution of the Old Testament, or you know, the way that the Pharisees or whatever, the corrupt, you know, leaders of the Jewish church, whatever they were saying. He was like, no, 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 like you can have your own relationship with God. Like we're all brothers and sisters, whatever. And that was just so radical at the time that they killed him. And nowadays, like that whole thing is like that is now this own 2,000-year-old, well outdated way of looking at the world that, you know, I even like to think that Jesus himself would look at the church and be like, oh fuck, like god damn it, you guys did it again. Like what, how did you do this? Like how did you take my words so wrong that you created another like wrong, you know, outdated institution?
Well, that's why I mean, like, take the game of telephone, for instance, right? Like, if you critically think about religion, right? And like you said, scripture that's been written 300 or was it 300,000 years or 3,000 years
3,000,
or
yeah, like
3,000? Yeah.
3,500 years ago.
So, well, I mean, with the game of telephone, like that's why the game exists, is because humans are so bad at relaying one information to another, and it's a ton of reasons why, right? I mean, there's so many variables. It's your own experiences, maybe what you're interpreting, what they're saying. Maybe you just didn't hear them correctly. Maybe there's all kinds of stuff. And so when it gets to the end person who's receiving that message, you know, more often than not, everyone laughs because the message is completely different and wrong. So I think that it's fair to say that there should be some skepticism of like, you know, something that's been written for so long ago and translated over time. And of course, human intervention when it comes to agendas and personal interests or interest of groups. I mean, there's all kinds of fuckery that could happen, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I get it in that sense. I don't know how we got on this tangent, but I agree with you is what I'm saying. Yeah, it's a slippery slope, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it is.
What what's your experience been like, bringing this nascent type of inspiration, right? This new burgeoning psychedelic movement that's happening into a publicly facing album that may not be as easily, understood by the average person. How are you dealing with that type of response, and what are how are you going about it?
Yeah, I, I feel like that's just sort of been my journey as an artist is like just you cannot guarantee what anybody else thinks about your art. Like I learned a long time ago and am constantly reminded that like even your best friends or people with the same music taste, you never align on everything. And so like the only thing you can guarantee is your own taste. Like all I know is what I think sounds good. I could maybe write a song that I think you like, but like I'm not in your head. I could, there's no way to know. So just to save myself the time, I'm sort of just honing my craft into like trusting my own voice, trusting my own taste, which I'd like to think pays off by being original, and because again, like I only know what I like, and I can only create what I can create, so trying to, even if I tried 100% to sound like Tom York, it would still be me parroting Tom York, so I'm
Right.
just trying to like find out who I am, which is sort of the creative artistic journey anyways, is as you express yourself, you kind of find out who you are in that sense too. So like for me, it's not so much about mass appeal. Like I'm never going to be the Justin Bieber of the world, I'm as much as I do like pop music, I appreciate all types of music. Um, I just have I feel like there's certain, I'll hear a clip of a song and be like, dang, like I want more of that. And it's kind of up to me to make it. That's the way I see it. It's like I'm making music that like I want to hear, like it's like a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of this, and hopefully it comes out as something completely new. And really that's all I do it for, is like it's to connect with it's to connect with people, give them something new and exciting and like modern and relevant. If I'm writing stuff that's like, oh, it's got to sound like it came from 1965, like I'm living in 2023 now. Like there's so many different ways to make music, different instruments to do it, and like the microphone on my iPhone is better than 95% of the commercially available microphones from like 1970 and backwards. It's better than every single thing that they had. So it's important to like stay humble and not go like what is that Woody Allen movie, Midnight in Paris, not to romanticize the past to the point where you're like shutting yourself out from the the era that you live in. It's easy to be like, oh man, I wish I grew up in the 60s or the 20s, but it's like I bet in 50 years there's going to be a ton of kids be like, man, I wish I grew up in 2020. Like, so that's sort of what keeps me confident enough to like make something that I know isn't doesn't have the mass appeal that I want, but it's something that I really love. My idols have like 3,000 followers on Instagram. You know what I mean? Like they're not the
Right.
Drakes of the world. And so
Right.
like I'm okay with that. It's all I like to be discovered. I don't need to be like I want to be that little secret thing that somebody finds in 20 years and be like, whoa, like check this out.
Yeah. No, I think that's the right approach. And it sounds like as you're talking, I'm hearing you've basically mastered the art of managing expectations, right? Like you've come in and you already know what you want out of this, and there's no false hope or this delusional sense of where you want to get. I mean, if it happens, it happens, but you're gonna produce the music that you want. And I think that's the right way to go about it, man. I mean, you mentioned like if you wanted to try to be like Tom York, well, people would obviously see that you're trying to do that because you're not Tom York, as you put it, right?
Mhm.
And so being yourself is, I think, the best approach in any type of situation that you're doing, because authenticity, people love that. People love when people are being themselves and being authentic. Um, so that's the right approach, man. I mean, and naturally, I'm sure that you're seeing, like, as you're being yourself and you're producing, like, that audience will gravitate. They'll come because they're gonna seek out what they want, and if that's what it is, then it's a match.
Exactly. Yeah, I can't. That's the thing about taste and opinion is like no matter what. I remember in some bands that were more collaborative in my past, where a bandmate would bring me an idea and I'm just not feeling it, and I had to figure out, like I had to be okay with not liking other people's ideas, and I had to be okay with them not liking mine, because the reality is like the it's involuntary. Liking something, you can't play somebody a song and they're just like, well, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. And then you're like, but did you know that this was written on a 4-track recorder by one guy? And you're like,
I don't care.
yeah, like it sounds like, it sounds like garbage,
Right.
like so there's that sort of gives me confidence too, where it's like I can't force anybody to like my music. I can only hope that somebody does.
Right. Right. No,
And
that's
that mindset that took, I've written and released like 7 albums up to this point that are just like all independent releases that like I never wanted to invest in or promote too heavily, because like even I knew, I was like, okay, this isn't like as good as I want. It's not even as good as I want it. So like why would I expect anybody else to really like it? So I think just experience sort of kind of forges that mindset where you're just like, okay, the first album didn't make me world famous. Okay, the second album didn't make me world famous. Okay, the third album didn't make me world famous. Like, there's only so many albums you can release that don't make you world famous before you start realizing, like, maybe I just like doing this?
well, I'll tell you what, you've gained a fan for sure. I was telling you before we recorded, I'm a fan, man. I listened to it, Kukuni, and I enjoyed it. So I'm following you now on Spotify. And after we end this episode, I want to talk to you about where I can purchase a vinyl record, because I got my record player, and that would be
Oh, wow.
awesome to have. So anyway, as we wrap up, Willie, I want to ask you, so liquid culture, what's that about?
Liquid Culture is it's a new record label that started I want to say last year by Zoe Wilder and Mike Schur. They're
Shout
two
out to Zoe Wilder,
big time
awesome publicist out of the California area. Super, just amazing person. Yeah,
living legend. That's
yeah.
sort of how just the work I've seen her do in the being in the cannabis world. As soon as I saw that it was like a recommended Instagram popped up, Liquid Culture Records, I recognized the art as from Emily Eisen, who I know is like very connected with Zoe. So I was like, I feel like it's called Liquid Culture. I love that. It's like a play on like mushroom spore propagation. Um, so I liked the name, and it's a record label specifically for like promoting and like facilitating psychedelic experiences, which like even though I don't do psychedelics personally anymore, the what psychedelics had done for my life and sort of kind of setting me on the path to be a creative musician and person, um the what psychedelics did for me, I will forever be indebted to. And so like if I can be a part of a label that is not just like, oh yeah, some of our guys do drugs, it's like we are a psychedelic label, like there's no fear, there's no stigma, there's no shame about it. Like that's what I want to be a part of. I encourage anyone that hasn't done mushrooms yet to like find a buddy that you trust with your life and do mushrooms in a very safe setting, like hopefully your living room, like don't do it on the beach, don't do it in the park for your first time. Like as cool as that sounds, like you just don't want to, that's too many variables. You could have a stranger come up, you could have the cops come up. Like
Mm-hmm.
go somewhere that you can really, somewhere that you can take your clothes off and roll around and maybe even scream if you have to, like really like whatever the mushrooms or whatever the psychedelics bringing up in that moment is supposed to be there in that moment, and you have to express it, you have to sit with it. Like the worst trips, if you let go and release, those become the best life-changing trips, and it just breaks my heart to hear people that have like bad trips because there just isn't enough information out there to tell people like those are the moments that lead to like breakthroughs and healing. And I forget the word that they use for it. It's like a psychological term where you just like you're releasing all of this energy and you're sort of just like able to let go of like trauma or like negative thoughts or something. So that's why I think Liquid Culture is such a great label, because like I'm so passionate about psychedelics and what they can do for people, and it's like really awesome to be with a group of artists that are aligned in that just like psychedelics are not just illegal, it is a tool for the betterment of humanity. And so as soon as I saw that Liquid Culture was on the same page, I sent my music, I reached out, and I was just like, I'm 100% on board with everything you guys are doing. And I, I hoped that my music would also kind of carry that same message. And since they picked me up, I'd like to think that it does.
That's awesome, man. A member of the Liquid Culture label. Awesome. Well, Willy, I really enjoyed talking with you this evening, man. It's been a pleasure just learning about this whole kind of community and what you're working on and focused on with Kukuni. And where can people find your music, your website, so they can learn more and listen to this awesome psychedelic experience, the
Yeah.
experiential music.
So we're on all the streaming platforms. Just type in Kukuni, Kukuni. I use Spotify. We're on there. We're also on Bandcamp, kukuni.bandcamp.com. And the music, kukunimusic.com is our website. And you can just get, there's some links on there as well. But I know our Instagram, which is at Kukuni Music, there's a link to like a link tree that just has, Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, whatever streaming service you use, where the album is available.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to include those links in the YouTube description box so people can find them
Awesome.
there as well.
Awesome.
Willy, again, thank you so much, man. Good luck, and I can't wait to listen to all the music that you put out moving forward. It's gonna be
Thank you
exciting.
so much, Kevin. It's been a blessing. It's been an honor to be here.
Of course, man. The pleasure's all mine. Thank you again, and thank you all for listening. Bye.
Thank you.